To save the world, you must be first willing to burn it. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Mere Mortals Book Reviews. I'm your host here, Kyron, live on the 5th of February 2025. And as you might surmise, this is the podcast where I unleash my anarchic fury on the book establishment elite. Okay, no, I won't be doing that today, but I will be talking about this book here that we have, The Man Who Was Thursday by G.K. Chesterton. So this book was published in 1908, 178 pages in length. Took me probably 2 to 3 hours reading because it is a rather short novel. It doesn't take too long to really get through, and it is fun, which means you will actually probably get through it a bit quicker than you normally will. So there's a short fictional novel of a policeman who joins a 7-person high cabal ranking system of anarchists who are plotting to take down the world, basically. And he wants to stop their evil ideology. So he enters in disguise as a policeman, but pretending to be an anarchist as well. I'm going to be struggling with that word a lot, I imagine. And he begins to learn that there are actually some allies amongst him in this 7-person cabal. And so he's enlisting their help to take down the ringleader, the big kahuna himself. And it's set in 1900s England, has a bizarre feel to it. Absurdist style, but with a levity that I don't think you'll find in some other works which is similar to this, and we'll get onto that at the very end. 15 chapters in total, and they all have rather unique names. So the 2 Poets of Saffron Park, The Secret of Gabriel Syme, The Tale of a Detective, The Exposure, The Man in Spectacles, The Duel, The Criminals Chase the Police, etc., etc. It goes on and on. So let's jump into the themes and some questions for today. And they're going to be centered around paradox, which is a favorite of mine. I love talking about paradox, find it fascinating. But in particular, why it emerges within people, and in particular, how people can become what they say that they hate or that they're fighting against. What is it that people actually fear, and why do they fear it? Paradoxically, sometimes fear can cause itself, or that good things can cause fear. And how do we even know what we're fearful of? So we start the book with Syme. This is the detective, and it's a banger of a start. I really, really enjoyed the start of this book. The first probably like 20 pages just drew me in instantly. And what we see with him is you get this huge payoff of this tension, of the setting up of the tension of what's going to happen with this book, because very quickly we see this sneaky, underhanded thing where he infiltrates the anarchists. He gets elected very sneakily as well, using great oratory manners to get elected to the council. And he then joins the council, and we're set up with this big enemy, the main ringleader, who is named Sunday. And all the people in this cabal, the 7 people, they're all named after a day of the week, hence why he is the man who was Thursday. So we see his motivations, his upbringing as a child, of what led him to fight against anarchy so strongly, why he joined the police, how he joined the police in a rather fortunate manner. And it really sets up the book nicely in terms of the motivation of this character. And I think it starts off, while still silly at the start, it has this chance to become a more serious novel at a certain point, probably within the first 20 pages, where it's like, okay, this could actually be like, there's a gripping tension when the first policeman on the other policeman on the cabal meeting gets exposed. It could have been him, and you're like, geez, this could turn into like a serious, dangerous situation or things like this. So on the serious side of things, I think there is a deep truth to this idea of the intellectual criminal, why Syme was fighting so hard against anarchy. And it's because, suffering is rather hard to quantify. And when you have things like white collar crime, which is causing, fraud, financial suffering, of underhanded dealings, of where it's very hard to prove intent, of where there's no real physical evidence of the crime. It's somewhat of a he said, she said sort of thing. there's a lot of suffering there, but it's hard to quantify and put a responsibility to when companies explode or implode, or there is underhanded dealings of stock markets and things like this, uh, versus the real simple stuff of criminals who murder someone in a crime of passion, of thievery, of stealing physical objects and things like this. And we certainly see that some of the recent villains, some of the most evil people in history, have been those ones who you would almost call white-collar criminals in a sense. And I'm talking of the Lenins, the Stalins, the Pol Pots, these people who, whilst you could say they thought they were doing good, they were actually doing a lot of bad. And there was not anarchy, those that I listed were communists, but there was this, they believed themselves beyond morals in some sort of ways. They ended up becoming what they said they hated, which was, the powerful elite who don't care about people and who are, suppressing the plebs and things like this. And they ended up becoming what they hated. It's funny, in many ways, I would trust the fate of Australia to a bitter murderer rather than a bitter anarchist, for example, because what we start to see with these people is that they become what they hate. And I guess going back to the book, onto the more silly side of things, the book doesn't go down this route of really explaining anarchy, why Syme is so against it, why he thinks this ideology is going to ruin the world, essentially, why it's more evil than perhaps someone who murders people, for example. No, it goes down the silly side. So we see him dive into this nest of rats, this den of vipers, if you will. And as he progresses through, the plot thickens and we realize, okay, a lot of these anarchists are actually policemen in disguise, much like he is, to infiltrate this cabal. And as he recruits more allies to the cause, as he is, trying to stop their plots of bombings and things like this, of murdering influential people, he realizes, well, he doesn't realize, we see that he's actually causing a lot of chaos himself. So we see there's this random chase with the professor, one of the other days of the week, who we learn is actually a policeman, the second policeman we learn of, where they're just like straight up running through the streets and going crazy. We see the duel outside of a train station where he essentially confronts a man and sets up this duel. We see a crazy foot chase turned to motor chase, with a large crowd of driving through streets, of requisitioning vehicles, of enlisting help, of getting down to the beach to fight to the death and fight for their cause. Which turns out to be a big misunderstanding. And finally, the wackiest, craziest stuff is the final chase of Sunday, where there's an attempt to apprehend Sunday, and it turns into a massive, once again, chase through the streets, chaos, elephants get involved, hot air balloons get involved. It becomes madness. And so even though he is against anarchy and he is for order and rules and things like this, we see in his actions and the actions of these other policemen that, they're actually causing a lot of anarchy. Like, there's a lot of chaos going on here. I would describe Syme as a relatively introspective sort of person. He has a very clear reason for his actions, why, and philosophy of why he's fighting against anarchy. And he also spent the time into, I guess, deciphering why he is against these and looking at himself. The other police, not so much. Some of them were just an actor who fell into the role of fighting against this, of this person, of anarchy. So, some of the others, their reasonings for getting into the business was a little bit iffy and seems just precarious, so just a whim of the moment. So we'll put them to the side and really focus on Syme here, in terms of this aspect of becoming what he hates in some sort of sense. And why does he engage in behavior that is contradictory to his stated aims of preserving peace, of keeping the streets safe for people, of not allowing people to just follow their whims and to create disorder and things like this. it's not for the greater good, which is typically what you'll see in cases like this, where this is where I imagine the Stalins of the world, they would say like, yeah, we need to break some eggs to make an omelet sort of deal. Sure, we need to suppress the kulaks, for example, but this is for the greater good to make the, yes, we have to kill some people. Oh, sure, starve a couple of million people, but, it's all for the greater good sort of thing. There's none of that rationalization going on here because the thought doesn't cross his mind. It's almost as he's become single-mindedly focused on the epitome of the evil that he is fighting, which takes us to the evil Sunday, this behemoth of a man, this bold, larger-than-life man who is witty, is charming, yet undeniably is evil. And during the final chase, the 6 police, and so yes, it turns out everyone else on the cabal, apart from Sunday, were policemen. And funnily enough, they were all recruited by Sunday themselves, which is a little bit of a twist ending, I guess. Although it's pretty obvious when you're reading it through, like who the man in the who was recruited them all, the man in the dark room. We get to see like their thoughts on Sunday. Why are they so strongly against him? Why are they doing all of these things to capture him? And the funny thing is, they almost unanimously, I think they describe him as the universe. Sunday is the universe, and they have very flowery descriptions for this. Some describe it as looking into the sun, like you don't really do that. It's fascinating, but it's also bad for you. You know that. Some describe him more in like a forest or a walk type thing. Some describe him as this faceless man who has a face simultaneously. Syme described him from the back as just this evil monstrosity, but when he saw him from the front was a bubbling joy of good, of everything that is beautiful in the world, this sort of thing. And it's almost like, within the universe that they're describing of this evil of Sunday is the abyss. There is the beauty of the eternal, of the vastness of the universe and things like this. And then there's also Nietzsche's abyss, where, you stare into the abyss and the abyss stares into you, of this kind of horror, of this dread of the, I don't know if you'd call it the unknown, but of the vast, of the grand. And I think to describe what went wrong, this paradox of how Syme is sort of became what he hated, was as he came into the plan, as he started to fight what it was that he hated, as he got into it, he already had this preconceived notion of the anarchists are evil. And so when he met someone, the ringleader, the top person of the pure evil that he was meant to find, he instead found, sure, some evil, but also a section of beauty within it. And it almost seemed an equal measure. You could probably say the same about some of those people I listed. Stalin, for all the bad things he did was apparently a very charming man, and probably when you were in his presence would be able to make you feel good. You would have good times with him. You would see the beautiful things that he was doing, of how hard he was working to help the state, the USSR. And so we have, people are contradictory. This is what happens. There is, finding pure evil is a very, very hard thing to do. And once you have this judgment or momentum coming in, it's almost like you have to fight against it, even though there is beauty and there is good within it. And, this isn't really a lesson of practicalities, this book. It's more in the philosophical sense of fighting against something and yet realizing that perhaps you are becoming it as well, getting lost in your own judgment, not taking the time to evaluate your actions and see, am I actually becoming what I hate? He who fight, there's a quote, I'm not going to get it particularly right, but, ye who fights monsters, watch out that you don't become one, or something like that, of becoming what you're afraid of. So that's kind of what I took from this book, which is this paradoxical thing where, sure, Syme would describe himself as a normal, nice-mannered man, and that yet here we see him dueling and fighting people relatively quickly. Bit contradictory. let's jump into the author, perhaps some extra details. So Gilbert Keith Chesterton, English author, born in 1874. He, somewhat like this book, was rather contradictory because he mostly wrote about serious stuff. He was, I believe, a journalist, art critic, things like this. And he particularly was a Christian apologist, I believe. And that is that he was defending Christianity. And he wrote some books. Orthodoxy is probably his most well-known one. But a series, Father Brown, I think was kind of like a detective or a Christian who solves crimes, something like this. Or, think of like the Miss Marple or characters like that where they're not really a detective, but they kind of find their ways into it. And this book is such an anomaly because from what I understand from his other works, I've yet to read any, or I might in the future, this is it's pure chaos and silliness. I don't think I've done a good job just yet. Hopefully I'll be able to touch upon it at the end of just how silly this book is. And people interpreted this book through this lens of seriousness, and especially of this character of Sunday as a deity, and perhaps attaching religious undertones to the characters. And there's 7 of them, so 7 days of the week. There was 7 symbology, I guess, is very prevalent in the Bible as well, and things like this. Sunday, is that the first day of the week? Oh my God, did God create the universe then, or was it the last day? Who knows? And yet he notes right at the end of this that he feels that people, the critics, didn't get it right because that the book itself, they focused on the words and they almost missed the title. They did miss the most obvious thing, which was the title, The Man Who Was Thursday, a Nightmare. It's actually missing it from this book. It was reflective of the time, so pessimistic, doubtful of the world, but with maybe some hope that it's almost like pessimism could draw its own positivity, something like that. Funnily enough, the most attracting part of my reading this beforehand was the title. I thought it was a great title, The Man Who Was Thursday. What does that mean? You discover very quickly of why it's titled like that, because he became named Thursday. Brilliant. I think it's a really great title. Probably one of the best, just in terms of like a pure title for a book. One of the best I've come across. Evocative, interesting, and it gets resolved rather quickly. So you're also not debating the whole book, like trying to interpret it. I was fortunate in that it came from a really good friend who recommended this to me, and this didn't ruin the title for me. And I had no idea of what the book was about. So I got to experience the curiosity of the title without ever knowing. So sorry, Eep, I might have ruined that for you now. And funnily enough, as we actually see on this book, it doesn't even have the subtitle, The Man Who Was Thursday, a Nightmare. So G.K. Chesterton probably still rolling in his grave because it's not even on the goddamn Penguin Books version that I have here. Yet he, even in his own time, was noting how people were getting the title wrong. So, oh man, just beautiful. Like, you can't ask for more paradox and silliness than that. So I'm going to add this note here because it'll rather contradict the summary I'm going to give. My intention for this book was for a pleasant read. I was just like, I didn't have any real expectations coming in, to be honest, other than this friend of mine, I'll call him out, Dave Jones, who was saying, like, you have to read this book. Like, drop everything you got and read this immediately. And I wasn't looking for deeper thought. As soon as I found out it wasn't super serious and it was silly, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to enjoy this. And that, the amount of notes that I typically take for a book review like this on my phone here, I'll typically take maybe 6 to 10 paragraphs. If I scroll down here, I can see that for some of these other books that I've got here, the Blue Ocean Strategy or The Lucky Country, I've got copious notes. But for this one, I think I had 1 paragraph and 1 extra note about the title. Yet, as I was doing this book review, I'm like, oh, you know what? This is actually rather intriguing. Oh, I remember this portion from the end. There was some real insightful moments, some powerful moments, such as the introduction. We see him meeting Gregory, who's, I guess, he's actually the most evil character that you'll find within the book, the real anarchist in some sort of sense. And he right at the end of the book, we get to meet him again, and he declaims, or he moans, he complains against the cabal, who are now having like this fancy dress party. They've all kind of reconciled with Sunday and realized he's a beautiful man. And he's like, you guys don't know suffering. You've yet to be broken. And Syme argues against this and says, no, we have, but looks at Sunday and asks, like, have you suffered, Sunday? And Sunday answers, can ye drink of the cup that I drink of? Which is, once again, it is a biblical reference, so I can see why people were talking about this. I feel like you could dig deeper into this. I feel like there was a lot of sections that I haven't missed, that my initial reading of this book, because it was superficial and funny, I perhaps glossed over a lot of what the deepness would be. Hence why I actually turned this into a deeper book review than I originally intended. I originally was, after reading it, was like, yeah, I'll talk about the silliness and it'll be fun, but I'll get this done within 15 minutes. Yet I can see why my philosopher friend Dave Jones recommended this, because it has that same quality to it that I find in 1984, that I've found in numerous Dostoevsky books, such as The Brothers Karamazov or Crime and Punishment, particularly where it'll be like a monologue of a character. So think of the manifesto that we find in Goldstein's manifesto in 1984, or Raskolnikov with the prostitute in Crime and Punishment, or even of the Inquisition scene in The Brothers Karamazov. I find in those scenes, there's something like powerful. It draws me in. I don't know what it is. It's like an essence. It's very hard to describe. I find that there's deeper meaning in these sections when something captures me so powerfully. Why I will never be an author myself, because there's no way I can construct words on paper or on my phone or on I don't have this way of words that these people have of drawing you in, or at least myself in, and that a bit of this is actually lost within this book, or you might need to reread it, and I do intend rereading this at some stage, because it's so silly, it is so funny, that you can kind of gloss over these portions which are much stronger. So let's jump into the summary, similar books, recommendations. I don't think I've done a good job of relaying how funny this book is, of how silly, how humorous just the actual story is. The weirdness, the satire, the paradox, the unexpected contradictions. Obviously on the grand scale, in terms of the whole setup of these policemen who are all in disguise end up fighting against this man who employed them himself. Like, the whole thing from start to finish is pretty funny. But even in the really small details, such like Professor de Worms, when he was talking about his imposter and how he came into this position, and he was like, explaining things which aren't as self-evident, which aren't necessarily. So he was an actor, and he's like, I was trying to portray this feeble old man, and when I went into the same room as him, obviously people thought I was the real old man because I have the energy of youth in directing towards being feeble and old. And so it's this real twist on what you kind of expect. In first reading, it's merely fun, but I intend to go back in this and still have fun whilst reading it, but tackle it with another light, another lens of viewing for deeper things, because that's not what I was looking for or appreciating when I read it this first time. So I don't know what to give this, because initially, if you'd asked me what's the rating of this book after reading it, before doing the notes for this, I'd have been like, it's 5.5 out of 10. It's fun. It's silly. I got a couple of laughs from it. Am I looking for anything deeper from this? Would I ever reread it? Probably not. Yet after creating these notes, I'm like, damn, this is pretty damn good. I do want to reread this, so I'm going to give this a simultaneous 5.5 out of 10, and then an also 8 out of 10. The Man Who Was Thursday by G.K. Chesterton definitely has potential in it, and one of those rare books where I'd probably recommend it to really anyone, because you can have fun and silliness with it and get that, or you can go deeper into it and dive into serious topics. So definitely worth a read. Similar books, man, like I've already listed 1984, The Brothers Karamazov, a couple of other things. This reminds me of the Sherlock Holmes, especially with the titles at the front and how it's set out. The long drawn out nature and secrecy of the police detectives reminds me of spy novels such as John le Carre's Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. It's hard to go away from the similarities of Franz Kafka or Albert Camus with the weirdness of the strange paradox. But it's much more lighthearted than that. And it's got these nice twists in it as well that you'll see in something more like Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. So, I mean, it's a banger of a book. I really, really do enjoy it. So, yeah, check out The Man Who Was Thursday, G.K. Chesterton. Value for value, that'll be the end of this book review. What can you do to provide some value back for this? Well, this is a value for value podcast, so I do try and hope that I've given you a lot of value up front here. So sharing this with someone, giving us a recommendation of giving me recommendations of books you think I would enjoy that are similar to this. I would love to know of a book that you think is available for anyone, where it has the capture of just being a nice read, but also having deeper aspects. If you want to dive into that, please reach out via some mechanism. You can also support the podcast financially via the PayPal link down below in the show notes. Of last week, Carlos AM actually left a really nice comment on the book review, or not book review, it was kind of a book review, I guess, of the Alchemista, of the art of translation. And one thing he noted, which I didn't touch upon, but which I think is definitely worthy of highlighting, was sometimes even within languages themselves, they need retranslations. And if you've ever tried to read any of Adam Smith or people of that like, damn, it's pretty hard to read Old English, man. Like from the 1500s, 1600s, 1700s even. English has changed a lot over that time. So not only when you are translating from completely different languages, but the same language, Old English, i.e. English nowadays, it can require translations of the same language. So time itself has a diluting effect on the actual translation, because the older the translation is, the more likely whatever you're translating into has also changed over time. And hence why kids nowadays, and I say nowadays, but it's always nowadays for everyone, speak with words which just would make no sense to, skibbity and shit like that. And that's just the way they talk. And much like someone will say rad or cool, and they might mean something different from what rad or cool means nowadays, especially if they're older. So thank you very much, Carlos Sam, for that comment. Really was really insightful. I thought that was great. We are live here. I am live here on 11 a.m. on a Wednesday, Australian Eastern Standard Time. Would love for you to come join in. We do see the Mere Mortals podcast, aka Juan, was saying, yeah, my favorite time of the week is a Thursday. Imagine if the man had been Friday. I'm not sure what would have happened if he'd been Friday. I don't think the actual day of the week was very important, other than Sunday. There was some symbology right at the end in terms of like the moons, how they were dressed up, things like this. If I was a Christian scholar, perhaps there would be a lot more depth to this book, because I do feel there's probably some Christian symbology, theology written within here that I'm not aware of, because I don't dive into Christianity. It's not that interesting to me. But yeah, maybe I'll jump into one of his other books, Orthodoxy, and give that a try, for example. So really do appreciate you joining in, everyone. And yeah, would love for you to come join in. If you want notifications of that, I do post in the Discord as well as on our Twitter account. So just joining any of those, and you can also hit the bell notifications, those sort of things on YouTube. We are live on the podcasting apps as well. What's coming up? Juan has said he's got 3 book reviews this month, maybe. We'll see. But almost certainly he will be doing the 48 Laws of Power. I've got Blue Ocean Strategy right down here below me. I've almost finished The Lucky Country. I'm working on The Gilded Age by Mark Twain. and that is the foreseeable future for the Mere Mortals book reviews. So really appreciate you joining in. Hope you're having a fantastic day wherever you are in the world. Ciao for now. Kyron out. Bye.